Okay, so it's 11 now. So please take a couple of minutes to take the attendance for class. So if you are taking the class in seat like you are here in person, then the attendance code is 27Y 27Y4Y5. And then if you are taking this class on Zoom, your attendance class code should be PW15XU. Okay, so please take a couple of minutes. Please take a minute to take the attendance if you haven't already done so. Okay, have you guys been with the attendance? Yes. Okay, good. Okay, hopefully you guys over who are taking the class from Zoom are able to take your attendance too. If you have problems, please speak up right now. Otherwise, I'm just going to proceed. Just going to proceed as if with the assumption that you have been able to successfully take attendance. Okay, so before we start talking about utilitarian theory, well, before we start getting into class proper, so let me just draw your attention to something. So yesterday I posted the study questions for the writing assignment one on Moodle. Um, uh, just in case you didn't see it, let me show you real quick. Okay, sorry. Where is Moodle? That's okay. This is the cross Moodle site. It is I posted it yesterday. So there are 4 questions altogether. So what you need to do is to take the next few days to to prepare the responses to those questions, and then come to class next Tuesday. And you can take as much time as you want. Well, not really. I'll give you the whole class period to answer those 4 questions. And just note that the it's closed book. Well, I guess what that means is that you're free to refer to notes and stuff when you are preparing for the preparing the answers to the questions. But when you come to class next week and write out the answers to the questions, it is closed book. You're not allowed to refer to any notes. If you are taking this assignment, if you are doing this assignment on Zoom, I'm going to require you to turn on your video so I can see you and proctor you. So yes, so that'll be that. Okay, any questions? Yes, Matt.
How much writing on each question do you want? Several paragraphs, a paragraph?
Okay. Let's see. I think probably a kind of a longish paragraph. By longish, I mean, so if you have an A4 piece, if you, do people still say A4? The 8.5 by 11. If you have an 8.5, 11 sheet of by 11 sheet of paper, and your handwriting is medium size, I think maybe something like slightly over half a page for one question should suffice. Yes. And yes. Okay.
Can we type our responses?
I mean, sure. I mean, I guess. I mean, if you're if you feel that you can write better when you're typing than when you are writing, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's fine. I mean, I slightly prefer handwritten responses, but typing is fine. So if you are here and you're typing, just email it to me when you are done. Okay. And let's see, there's something more to say. No, I actually don't remember what I was going to say. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you have had a chance to look at the questions already, the questions are actually quite closely based on stuff that that we have talked about in class or that we are going to talk about in class. So yeah. There aren't any there really aren't any big surprises or maybe even small surprises. They're just the questions are there to make sure that you actually follow along when we talk about starting class and that you do at least some of the readings. Okay, okay. So with that, let's begin with the topic for this week. Okay, so this week we are going to we are mainly going to cover utilitarian theory or utilitarianism. Before I do that, I kind of want to give you an overview of what's going on as far as our entire course is concerned, and and maybe talk a little bit about where we left off last week. So you might remember that. So last week we spent a big part of last week going over Plato, going over Plato's going over certain views about justice in Plato's Republic. We are going to go back later in the semester, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks from now. We are going to go back to reading Plato's Republic. We read book two. In a few weeks' time, we're going to skip and read book four. In a couple of weeks. So so it's kind of I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. So what happens is that in the last week, right, in book two, Plato had one of his characters, Glaucon, talk about talk about the nature of justice, and basically he has Glaucon tell that story, and they basically try to show that being just doesn't pay. In book four, we'll actually kind of see Plato's response to this whole thing. We'll see Plato giving a response as to what justice is and what it means to be just. Okay, so that's kind of primer. But in the meantime, I'm doing a kind of detour away from that. Last week was a sort of thing to get us thinking about big issues of justice and morality in general. The goal of this week and the next is to go into more detail into some particular theories of ethics. So last week we were kind of taking a big picture view. So this week, from this week onwards, we're going to kind of zoom in and take and focus on more particular theories. As I said, today and Thursday, we're going to focus on utilitarian theory. But before I do that, I'm going to, I should give you an overview of what theories there are when it comes to ethical theories. So this is an overview of ethical theories. Okay. Basically, you can say that all of the theories of ethics in Western philosophy can be broadly divided into three categories. The first category is utilitarian theory, and then there is virtue ethics, and there's the duty-based ethics. You might remember that on the first day of class last week, I mentioned that for the longest time, for most of the last 200 or 300 years, most of ethics has been concerned with morality, has been concerned with rules for how to do the right action. So number one and number three, utilitarian theory and duty-based ethics, they are kind of concerned with rules and principles as about right action. Virtue ethics, on the other hand, is more concerned with cultivating certain habits and virtues that will allow you to live a good life. And we already had a small taste of virtue theory last week because when we read Plato's Republic, we can see that Plato was mainly concerned with justice as a virtue, And as we go further in the semester, we'll look at Aristotle as well and the Stoics. And Aristotle and the Stoics were also very concerned with, with leading a virtuous life, because they believe that if you live a virtuous life, then you have a much better chance of living a good life. But of course, there is a slight wrinkle here, and the wrinkle is that all of these, Plato and Aristotle and Stoics, they kind of disagree among themselves as to what is a good life. The short version of this is that some of these people believe that virtue is literally all you need in order to live a good life. It doesn't matter if you're poor, or if you have lots of illness, or if you are in prison and being tortured every day. So long as you have virtue, virtue is all you need. All you need is virtue, and then you'll be happy, no matter how painful the external circumstances of your life may be. So I'm going to call this the virtue-only view. Virtue is all you need to be happy. So the Stoics actually believe in this virtue-only view. They believe that virtue is all you need to be happy. Why? Because because life is very unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen to you from one day to the next. You might be really healthy today, and tomorrow you might be sick. You might be very well-to-do today, and tomorrow you might lose all your money. So you have no control. You have very limited control over the external circumstances of life. So if you rely on the external circumstances of your life for happiness, then you are doomed. Because then you will never be happy, or rather, your happiness will kind of fluctuate from one day to the next if you are depending on external circumstances. On the other hand, according to the Stoics, if you believe in virtue, if you rely on virtue, then being virtuous is something that you can control, right? You can always choose to be kind to others. You can always choose to be courageous. You can always choose to be wise. So the Stoics believe that because virtue is the only thing that you can control, virtue is all you need to be happy. But as I said, not everybody agrees with the Stoics. Aristotle and maybe Plato as well, they believe that yes, virtue is very important, but you also need some external goods in order to be happy. If you are virtuous but you have no friends, it's hard to be happy. If you are virtuous but you are totally destitute all the time, it's also very hard to be happy. So you do need some things in the world to be to be happy. So the Aristotle and the Plato disagree with the Stoics. They think that you need a little bit more than virtue in order to be happy. So you can think of the Aristotle and Plato as being in one camp, and the Stoics with their virtue-only view as being in the opposing camp. Okay, so I didn't really mean to go into so much detail about virtue ethics right now. This is I'm supposed to talk about utilitarian theory today, so this is just a kind of preview. Okay, so and then there's 1 and 3. There's all these different. There is utilitarian theory and duty-based ethics that they are not really concerned with virtue. They are not really concerned with how to live a good life. They are more concerned with how to take the right action. What is the right action to take in the various circumstances of life? Now, you will see that utilitarian theory and duty-based ethics, they have very important disagreements about what is the right action. To make a long story short, the utilitarians believe that they simply believe that an action is right if it promotes happiness. If an action, if a particular action leads to more happiness overall, and I don't just mean your personal happiness, I mean the happiness of everybody, society in general. So if an action leads to more happiness in society in general, overall, then it is right. Okay, Prem.
So is utilitarian saying that like pretty much greatest amount of good for greatest amount of people?
Yeah, that's the simplest way to put it. Yes. the duty-based ethics, people who believe in duty-based ethics, they kind of disagree with the utilitarians. They say, yeah, I guess it's good to be happy, but you know, but there are other things in life. There are other things in life that are that are more important than happiness. I mean, if you well, here's a very here's the most typical example that some people would say. They would say, look, uh, if you can torture one person, if you can torture one person to save the lives of many other people, and I mean, and assume that that person is innocent, right? So if you can torture one innocent person to save the lives of many people, if you can torture one person to bring happiness to many people, should you do it? Um, uh, and they would say the answer is no, because it seems that it's just wrong to torture people, no matter what. Even if torturing one person will bring a huge amount of happiness to many other people, you probably still shouldn't do it because people shouldn't be tortured. Because it's wrong to just inflict harm and pain and suffering on innocent people. So these people will say that, look, happiness is nice, but there are certain things that are more important than happiness. There are certain duties that we owe to other people. For example, we owe it to other people not to torture them. So we have a duty not to torture people, and those duties count for something, no matter how much happiness is at stake. Okay, so Okay, so this is the end of my, this is the end of my overview. I'm going to kind of set aside 2 and 3 for right now, and I'm just going to focus on one. So, you can't really study utilitarian theory without reading some John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill, together with Jeremy Bentham, they are the most, they are the most prominent philosophers who champion utilitarianism. So for today, we are going to look at, we are going to look at chapter 2 of Mill's Utilitarianism, and then on Thursday, we're going to look at chapter 3. So in chapter 2 is actually quite straightforward. What he does is basically, he lays out what is utilitarianism, he explains it very briefly, and then he tries to answer objections that people may have to utilitarianism, problems that people may have with it. So there are basically 3 objections that he tries to respond to. And then in chapter 3, he takes on another interesting question, which is why should people bother with utilitarianism? I mean, you tell me that the right action to do is to promote the general happiness. Why should I bother? Why can't I just go on being the selfish person that I am? So chapter 3 is short, but very interesting. I'm going to just focus on chapter 2 for today, and then we'll look at chapter 3 on Thursday. Okay. So let's look at what utilitarianism says. So as Prem mentioned just now, it's about basically the greatest good for the greatest number. The way Mill puts it, this is how Mill actually says it. He says that according to utilitarianism, actions are right as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to promote the reverse of happiness. Prem.
So another question is, would utilitarian be wrong because like their main focus is happiness and happiness is subjective?
Oh, and happiness is subjective in the sense that we cannot measure we cannot measure happiness properly.
Subjective in the terms of the definition of happiness for everyone can be different. So that's where the theory of subjectiveness comes in with detail, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So he has one way of answering this problem. I think at some point he says that, look, so how do you know? How do you know that? How do you know that happiness is the same for everybody? And his answer is, well, let's ask people. So if if everybody can agree, if everybody can agree that doing a particular thing gives makes them feel better than they did before they did it, then that thing would contribute to their happiness. Uh, there is something else here, which is that he goes on to say that there are different kinds of pleasures. There are the so-called higher pleasures and the lower pleasures. Okay, but I don't know if this is the problem you are getting at, Prem. But because when I was just talking, it suddenly occurred to me that there is a problem here, which is that suppose both of us say that we like ice cream, right? Suppose we both say that ice cream gives us pleasure and make us happy. Uh, but how do you, I mean, how can you measure? How can you measure the difference in the amount of pleasure the ice cream gives each of us? Does it give you more pleasure or does it give me more pleasure?
That's where the term of subjectiveness comes in, I guess, because it would be subjective to you to how much ice cream you like, and it would be subjective to me to how much ice cream that I like. But for example, if you say you like ice cream and I say I love ice cream, that's where the form of equivocations come in, and there would be another impasse on subjectiveness again.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I guess you can try to get around this problem by getting people to like maybe give their own report. So I can ask you, hey, Prem, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is I hate it, and 10 is wonderful, I'm in heaven. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like ice cream? And then maybe you say 8. And then you ask me the same question on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like ice cream? I say 8. So does that solve the problem?
I don't think that would solve the problem entirely because the form that you're using to measure 1 to 10 might be different for like how much you feel that 1 to 10 is and how much I feel that 1 to 10 to be.
Yeah, yeah. So there is a kind of equivocation. Yeah, maybe equivocation is not quite the problem here. The problem is that um, the everybody's everybody's report of happiness is well, I mean, it's subjective. And what that means is that if I say something is 8 to me and you say something is 8 to you, there is no way to know whether my 8 is as intense as your 8. True, that is the problem. Uh, and the thing is that Mill doesn't seem, I think when I was reading Mill yesterday, I get a sense that he, in some corner of his mind, he knows about this problem, but he doesn't seem to be very concerned about it. Why isn't he very concerned about it? I think maybe there's one reason why. Maybe he's not very concerned about it because because he's probably saying, look, I mean, if you want to create a moral theory based on happiness, if you want to say that an action is right because it brings about happiness, well, you got to start somewhere, right? I suspect that if Mill was alive today, he probably would make use of those, what do you call those things? EEG, the machines that monitor brain activity.
CAT
Yeah, CAT scans. Okay. Yeah, if Mill were alive today, he would maybe try to get around the problem by using CAT scans. That's actually quite interesting. So maybe instead of, if he wants to be really thorough about it, he will, in addition to getting people to write out written reports of whether they like ice cream, he might also hook their brains up to those MRI machines and basically take CAT scans of people's brain activity, while they are eating ice cream. So if a certain area of their brain lights up, in the same way, right? They will say, oh, okay, that shows that Matt likes ice cream to the same degree as Frank.
So would that mean that Mill's theory is absolute to every individual?
Absolute to every individual.
Yeah, meaning like it is the same criterion to every individual.
I'm not fully sure what you mean by same criterion to every individual. Do you mean that if you accept Mill's theory, then everybody has to accept happiness as the standard?
That is kind of what I mean. But onto that, I also mean like, yes, like if we do accept Mill's theory of happiness as morality, like to determine morality, would that mean like everyone has the same sense of happiness to justify their morality?
To define their morality?
Yeah.
Okay. On the face of it, that actually is in a way, right? That actually, whatever you just said, it actually anticipates this objection here. Because some people would object to some people will object to utilitarianism by saying, look, why should people use happiness? Why should people have happiness to be their end goal in life, or maybe a criterion, as you would say? Is happiness really that important? I mean, there are all kinds of, there are people in this world who are willing, who live unhappy lives in pursuit of something that they think is really important. Their mothers, for example, right? Like the first person that comes to mind is Jesus Christ. Christ, for example, allowed himself to be crucified. And he probably had all kinds of unpleasant experiences in his life in the course of propagating his teaching as well. So if you look at somebody like Christ, you wouldn't say that Christ's life was happy, because if he wanted to be happy, well, he would have kept his teachings to himself. He would have gone to be something else. He would have chosen another career, right? And then, of course, there are, on a smaller scale, there are also artists who for example, Van Gogh, right? Van Gogh, when he was alive, none of his paintings sold. So he was painting all these wonderful paintings, just because he wanted to paint them. He was living for the sake of art. Again, if you look at him, you wouldn't say that. I mean, it'll be very difficult to say that he was happy. I mean, he was living in poverty for most of his life. He had all kinds of health issues to contend with. Well, he could have been happier if he just, chose another career, right? So it seems that, you look at this thing, you look at what Mill is saying, and you say, yeah, I mean, I feel uneasy to say that happiness is important for everybody. Because there are some people who voluntarily choose not to live happy lives. By the way, so Mill kind of has an answer to that. He said, look, with Jesus, right? Jesus, well, he decided that he did what he did because he wanted to take all of humanity's sins on himself. He died for your sins, for our sins. I don't believe in Christ. I'm just saying that's what he did. That's what he thinks he's doing. So he died for your sins. So the idea is that he died so that you don't have to. I don't really know the full story, but I think the idea is that he died so that you don't have to carry the same amount of sin, right? So that you have a lighter load to carry. So in a sense, you can say that what he was doing wasn't for his own happiness, but he was still promoting happiness because he's promoting the happiness of everybody else who came after him. So everybody else wouldn't have to suffer from the same burden of sin as he did. Wonderful. Uh, okay, but what about, yeah, but what about art? What about art? Van Gogh is an example, right? Van Gogh isn't, when he was suffering during his lifetime, leading the life of a poor artist, he wasn't doing it. He wasn't doing it for the salvation of all humanity. I don't think he ever said to himself, "Look, I'm going to produce all this art, so that the people who come after me will be happier." I don't think any of this was going through his mind. He was just doing it. I don't know. This is a cliche, but you can say that he was just doing it that he was living for the sake of art, which is not the same as living for the sake of happiness. So, here's the deal. So it looks like there are at least a few people in this world, Van Gogh among them, who do not have happiness as their goal in life. Um, so, what are we to make of this? I guess the question is, can utilitarian theory still be, can it still be valid and correct if there are a few people in this world who do not pursue happiness as their goal in life?
Well,
Okay, you first, and then, okay, I thought I saw a hand, but okay.
well, you said you put the wording as very few people are unhappy, and the utilist definition would be like greatest amount of good to the greatest amount of people. So even if there's an imbalance towards the greatest amount of good to the greatest amount of people, like even if there's like 51 to 49%, util would still be working in theory.
Yeah. Feels like there is I don't know, it feels like there's a problem here because, uh, um, if, okay, does that mean that, if Van Gogh, if actions are right as they tend to promote happiness, as long as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness, um, does that mean that Van Gogh was, does that mean that Van Gogh was was wrong all his life in doing what he did? Yeah, somehow I don't think so. Mm. Yeah, I have when I was reading, I'll be honest here. When I was reading utilitarianism yesterday, and actually before yesterday, I haven't read utilitarianism in a while. So when I came back to it yesterday, after not having read it in a while, I get this weird, I had this weird uneasy feeling most of the time that I was reading it, and the weird uneasy feeling is this. Mill is a good writer. He's a good writer. He has this way of kind of just, so he has a grand idea, right? And the grand idea is that actions are right because they promote happiness and wrong because they promote happiness. Okay. And so he addresses all these problems that people may have with this idea, and he says, oh well, people who seem to be not promoting happiness like Jesus Christ, they really are promoting happiness in the big picture because they are still acting for they are still acting for the for the good of mankind in general, even if they are not promoting their own good. Um, but as he's saying this, you look at people like Van Gogh and you say, maybe he will have, I think Mill will have to say that Van Gogh is either crazy or wrong, because, he can't think of his actions as promoting general happiness. Right?
You also argued like the like the Nazis did, like experimented on people, but that helped medicine in Germany a lot. Like we learned a lot from that, even though it was terrible things.
Mm.
So in the long run, medicine probably saved more people because of that, but still everyone thinks it's wrong. So wouldn't that be another thing against utilitarianism?
Yeah, it sounds like, yeah, it does sound like another strike against utilitarianism. And okay, this was, okay, I know I'm kind of changing the subject a little bit because we were talking about what happens with people whose actions throughout their life don't seem to promote happiness, like Van Gogh. And now we are switching to this. So we will come back to this later, but this is interesting because what's really interesting and maybe disturbing is that Mill himself seems to kind of just go along with this. If you look at 1078, at the top of the left-hand side, left-hand paragraph, left-hand column, he says that it is the business of ethics to tell us what are our duties or by what test we may know them. But no system of ethics requires that the sole motive of all that we do shall be a feeling of duty. On the contrary, 99 hundredths of all of our actions are done from other motives, and rightly so done, if the rule of duty does not condemn them. It is the more unjust to utilitarianism that this particular misapprehension should be made a ground of objection to it, inasmuch as utilitarian moralists have gone beyond almost all others in affirming that the motive has nothing to do with the morality of the action, though much to do with the work of the agent. And this is important. He who saves a fellow creature from drowning does what is morally right, whether his motive be duty or the hope of being paid for his trouble. He who betrays the friend that trusts him is guilty of a crime, even if his object be to serve another friend to whom he is under greater obligations. So the idea, basically what he said, he's saying very straightforwardly here that motives don't matter. What matters with actions is the, consequences that flow from the actions. So it seems that, does it apply to the Nazi case? The Nazi scientists did all these horrible experiments on humans, which caused, suffering, a lot of suffering to a relatively small group of humans in the short run. But then after the war, the Allies came along and discovered their findings and used them to their advantage to benefit other people. And so what I don't know the numbers here, but what if what if it turns out that the number of people who have been saved from, so what the Nazis did was, they did all kinds of horrible things, but one of the things that they did was they subjected people to hypothermia, just to see how much cold you can suffer before your body starts to suffer all kinds of horrible effects. What if it turns out that the long-term benefits of all of their research actually outweigh the short-term suffering? Maybe as a result of that, right, we now know a lot more about hypothermia than we did before, thanks to their experiments. And so we are able to design, all kinds of interesting things to protect people from, hypothermia in all kinds of situations. So if this is true, right, then it would seem that what the Nazis did, if the long-term benefits outweigh the short-term harm, then it would seem that what the Nazis did, all the horrible experiments, were actually good things, not bad. It is uncomfortable. So by the way, Neil was saying all that. He was saying all that so he had good intentions. He had good motives. No pun intended. He was saying all that in response to number 3, right? So some people object. So there are some people who object to utilitarianism by saying, look, I mean, this theory, this theory imposes too high a standard for humanity. You can expect people, you can expect people to always act from, with a view to promoting the general good. Um, most of us don't have that kind of information. We don't know enough about the world to be able to do that. And the other problem is that most of us are just not that high-minded. We are too busy. We are too busy looking out for the interests of ourselves and our family and friends. We don't. Most of us just don't have the well, we're just not high-minded enough to always be thinking at all times of the good of all humanity. Uh, and so Mill's response to this is, well, motives don't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your action, it doesn't matter if the action that you take is only to benefit people that are close to you or yourself. So long as what you are doing doesn't violate other people's rights, doesn't cause, so long as what you're doing doesn't violate other people's rights, then whatever you do is fine. The motives don't really matter. It doesn't matter if you are if you save a drowning person because you really care for the person, or because you're just looking for a reward. In either case, in either case, when you die and go to the good place, you will still get the points, right? And you will still be rewarded duly. Because a good consequence is always a good consequence. You can't argue with that. So very good. The problem is, what if you set out to do something really horrible, and then that something ends up leading to more good consequences than that, like the Nazis, which means that there could be a bunch of Nazis in a good place.
To justify or to find justice of the actions that the Nazis committed, what theory are you using to justify what they did wrong or right? Are you using util?
Well, no, because if I'm using utilitarianism, then then it's possible that what they did could be right, right? Because the long-term benefit outweigh the short-term harm. Okay, what theory am I using? Okay, right now I'm not really using any theory. I'm just using a sort of common sense idea that it is probably wrong. That I just have this common sense idea that it's wrong to intentionally subject people to hypothermia just to see what will happen to them. It is wrong even if you are doing this for scientific research. So I'm just using this sort of common sense idea that it is wrong to subject people to harm just to see what will happen or just for scientific research. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking, maybe in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking of rights, right? Maybe I'm thinking people have rights. So if people have rights, then people have a right not to be, not to be subjected to hypothermia. And Mill actually I think he kind of talks about this. He kind of gestures at this a little bit somewhere in the passage that I just read. Hold on a second. He says that, and I actually just read this. So, he says, on the contrary, 99 hundredths of all of our actions are done from other motives, and rightly so done, if the rule of duty does not condemn them. Okay, okay. So if you say that, right? Can Mill actually say that? Can Mill actually say that it's not okay for us for the Nazi scientists to conduct all these hypothermia experiments because the rule of duty condemns such experiments? I mean, we can say that. I can say that because I'm not really a utilitarian. I'm just this guy on the street who likes to think about stuff. But can Mill actually say that himself? Because remember, Mill is the guy who believes that everything, right, every single action under the sun is to be judged as right and wrong on the basis of whether they promote happiness, right? So if an action, right, if an action, okay, even if an action violates duty, but if it promotes happiness in the long run, it sounds like if you are male, you will still have to say that it is the right action.
How could you ever know the long-term consequences of a reaction?
Very simple. You go to the good place and find out how many points you have, how many positive or negative points you have accumulated so far. I'm just kidding. I guess the simple answer is no. We can never really know. Nobody has perfect information. But in a sense, in a way, that kind of actually is the problem, because if you don't have perfect information, then then it's more troubling. It's harder to be a utilitarian, because if you don't have perfect information, then how do you know? How can you possibly know for sure that your actions really bring about good consequences in the long run? Maybe there are maybe there are a couple of ways to try to get around this problem. Okay, let me take a picture of this first before I write more stuff on the board. Oops. Let me just take a quick check to see if people. Okay. Kelsey Miller had a question from Zoom. Is there a right or wrong answer to these questions, or are they mainly opinionated? Okay. Well. Oh, sorry. It was supposed to be a private thing to me, but okay. Sorry, Kelsey. But I think it's a good question anyway. So we're now taking a step back from the particular problem we're dealing with. We are now dealing with philosophy in general. So is there a right or wrong answer to these questions, or are they mainly opinionated? Okay, this is my personal answer. My personal answer is that no, there is no right or wrong answer, but there is a good and a better answer. What do I mean? So, for example, if you are John Stuart Mill and you say that actions are right if they tend to promote happiness, and then somebody comes along and says, look, this is a useless theory because this is too high a standard for humanity. It is now up to you. It is now up to you as John Stuart Mill, to try to defend yourself from this objection. And whether or not you are successful in defending yourself from this objection, that would be a test of whether your answer is a good answer or not so good answer. So again, there are no right or wrong answers in philosophy. However, there are good and better answers. Okay, Kelsey Miller, I hope I answered your question. I should assign somebody to keep a lookout on the Zoom screen just in case there are questions that pop up that I don't notice. I forgot your name. What is your name? Kevin. Can I assign you to constantly stare at the screen? Yeah. Thank you. Where was I? Something about this thing.
Take a picture of it.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I was going to take a picture of it. Thank you. Sorry, lost my train of thought. Okay. Okay. So the thing is, okay. So the problem we were dealing with before I got sidetracked was this. The problem is that, utilitarianism doesn't seem like it seems like a problematic theory because nobody has perfect information about the world. And if you don't have perfect information, then how can you possibly know what's a good action and what's a bad action? Okay, I think there are a couple of ways to get around this problem. I'm just going to erase this part. Okay, so among utilitarians, they basically there are two kinds of utilitarian. There are two kinds of utilitarians in the world. They are what we call act utilitarians. Okay, versus rule utilitarian. I think Mill is a rule utilitarian because there is a passage somewhere in there that suggests that he is. Okay, but the difference is this. Difference is that if you are an utilitarian, then you basically will say that you basically will say that actions are right because they promote happiness. Actually, I'm not so sure whether Mill is an act or rule utilitarian because he actually does start out by saying this. Okay, but don't worry about that for right now. I'm just going to tell you what the difference is. So if you are a rule utilitarian, you're not really judging actions, you're really judging practices. So you would say that practices or policies are right because the keyword here is that because they tend to promote happiness in the long run. Okay, so a utilitarian would say, look, it is possible that that Nazi scientists may get lucky and end up creating, end up doing experiments that have that benefit humans in the long run. However, generally speaking, most people are not that lucky. Generally speaking, most people who do gruesome experiments on others, they tend to promote more harm than good. So, as a rule, the practice of doing gruesome experiments on other people is wrong because it tends to not promote happiness in the long run. Uh, it is also good to not torture people because torturing people tend you might get lucky. You might have this one case where torturing people is ends up promoting happiness, but for the most part, torturing people does not promote happiness in the long run. So even if you are very, very tempted to torture people, even if you are very, very tempted to torture somebody because you think that by doing so, you will be able to bring about a good outcome, you still shouldn't do it because torturing people, as a rule, the practice of torturing people tends to not promote happiness in the long run. Basic.
So those people who are performing those kind of experiments, are their goals tend to promote happiness in the long run, or are they trying to benefit themselves in the long run?
Oh.
Like, is that what they're trying to do, is promote happiness, or is their end goal something else?
That's interesting. So suppose you have a Nazi scientist who the thing about many Nazis, right, is that many of them actually sincerely believe that what they are doing is good for humanity. They believe that it's good for humanity, that we become more pure and all that. By extension, if you are a Nazi scientist, then you will see what you are doing as helping to promote the cause of Nazism. that you believe in sincerely. Yeah, I guess it's possible. I guess it's possible that that these Nazi scientists might be thinking, yeah, I mean, we will, but by doing all these experiments, we maybe will help the Nazis to win the war, and then we'll bring about a world in which, in which there are better people, a better world. Hmm. Interesting. Uh, was there a follow up to that question?
Not so much. I was just thinking, I was thinking, I was doing some research at one point, and unrelated to Nazis, but more so, American scientists back, I think, in the 50s and 60s were doing unethical experiments on American citizens on LSD. And
Oh, yeah.
it just reminded me of that because those scientists weren't necessarily looking for trying to better the world, more so trying to do psychological research on these people for their own benefit. So that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. 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 I don't know. I mean, what it could be that I don't really. Do you think it seems that many of the scientists who did these LSD experiments, I seem to recall that they have something to do with the CIA, right? Uh, and it could be that I wonder if maybe and this happened during the 50s, during the Cold War. So maybe they were thinking that, whatever they were doing would use certain interesting information that might help them to win again, win the Russians, beat the Russians. So so maybe the idea is that, well, if communism is a bad thing, and so so beating the Russians would be a good thing. And if what you are doing, if all these experiments on LSD are conducting, it might cause some harm to people in the short run. But if it helps us to, I don't know what the goal was. Maybe the goal was to come up with drugs that will enhance soldiers' performance or something. So if you could do that, then you will end up having all these soldiers who can perform better, and then we'll beat the Russians. Yeah, it's a bit simplistic, but maybe that was what they were thinking. So yeah, it could be that they are thinking in utilitarian terms as well. Yeah. So the thing about I don't know if this is useful, but if you are an ag utilitarian, ag utilitarian is it makes a lot of people very uncomfortable because it seems to suggest that the ends justify the means, right? Actions, any kind of action, even if it's a horrible action, is okay because so long as it promotes happiness somehow. So this makes many people uncomfortable, and so some utilitarians kind of they try to say, look, this is not what we mean by utilitarians. By utilitarianism, we mean this. So we mean that, look. We're not saying that the ends justify the means. What we don't agree with that. What we are what we are saying is that we believe in promoting happiness, but we are thinking more in terms of best practices. We are thinking more in terms of practices and rules that help to promote happiness in the long run, rather than just calculating the effects of individual small actions. Frank?
So under util, does that mean like there's a certain time limit to determine what is good or wrong? Because we're looking into the fact of like short term versus long term. And in the short term of like when Nazis were doing experiment, that may have seemed to be like a bad thing. On the long term of it, I guess it did come to be good. So like is utilitarianism like changing or is it like concrete? Is it innate?
Innate is is a kind of interesting statement because you're not saying that, you're not asking whether we are all innately utilitarians, right? That's not your question.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
Okay. So then the question is,
Like, what's a time limit to determine if something is good?
oh, is there a statute of limitations?
Yes, that's your limitations.
Okay. It feels like I'm gonna just preface all of this by saying that I don't really actually know the answer to this question because I'm not really a utilitarian. But okay, but having said that, I'm gonna just speculate. Feels like there shouldn't. Feels like there shouldn't be a statute of limitations. Because I mean, in law, in law, there is a statute of limitations for for actions. I don't remember. Maybe somebody here can remind me what purpose is of statute of limitations. But I don't really see why there should be a statute of limitations when it comes to actions. Okay. What is the purpose of statute of limitations?
I was gonna say the reason that the statute of limitations, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
The reason that it's in effect is because, they didn't want people that did something like, let's say you smoked marijuana when you were 16, and you weren't caught, but then we find evidence that you smoked it when you were 16, and like when you were 20. We don't want somebody going to jail for something you did like 4 years ago when you were a completely different person.
True. I mean, I understand that, but they have statute of limitations for more serious crimes.
Yeah, which doesn't make any sense, but that's the basic kind of idea for statute of limitations. But I don't know why they have it for actions. I think it's just to cover all of their bases.
I guess so. Because like I know that in most states, even murder has a statute of limitations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which doesn't make sense because if I kill somebody right now, and then the statute of it doesn't make sense to say that 20 years later I become a different person, therefore I'm not responsible. Okay, well, what we have just established is that the law doesn't make sense sometimes. Hey, but that's okay. I mean, I'm not a professor of law, so beyond my pay grade. But okay, but actually, so then if you come to moral theory like utilitarianism, it feels like there shouldn't be a statute of limitations, right? If I do a particular action, okay, I'm just going to say that the thing about me is that sometimes when I think about something, it suddenly occurs to me that I can actually repeat what I've just said. But I'm going to just say this thing first and then repeat it later. Okay, so what I'm about to say is that it feels like there shouldn't be a statute of limitations because if you are really concerned as a utilitarian to find out whether your actions are right or wrong, it feels like you should have the longest possible amount of time to judge whether the action is right or wrong. Because if you want to find out, if you need a lot of time to find out whether your action is right or wrong, it feels like you should have that amount of time.
So does that mean like right and wrong are indefinite? Like you're always changing under a util theory?
And that is actually the point I was going to get to. But if you give all actions an indefinite amount of time in which to judge the rightness or wrongness, then that means that an action that is right today may become wrong tomorrow, or it might become wrong in 10 years down the road, and that's really annoying. I saw a few hands, but I think I saw your hand first.
That's what I was going to say. For example, like back when there was slaves, that wasn't seen as wrong because everybody owned slaves. But now that would be seen as wrong. So is there a statute of limitations there on what's right or wrong?
Yeah. Although with slavery, I think that slavery is more complicated because one can argue. We can argue that with slavery, it's not so much that the problem is not that we didn't have all the information at that time. is that we had all the information, but we either choose to ignore the information. The information is that black people are not property and they are human beings and they should not be safe. So we either had the information and we chose to ignore it, or we what's the other possibility? Okay, one possibility is that we chose to ignore the information, or the second possibility is that we maybe I think I was thinking there's a second possibility, but I think there's only one. So what that means is that if you are a good utilitarian, right, slavery should have been wrong from the beginning of time. It's just that, well, not everybody is a good utilitarian. So okay, the guy in the blue shirt, what is your name? Okay.
So I was thinking the purpose of statute of limitations could be that evidence could deteriorate over time, which means the credibility of charges could be lessened.
Yeah, I suppose so. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Never thought of that. Right. And you're going to say?
I was going to say the same. I Googled it, and they say that evidence can deteriorate over time.
Oh, okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I guess that's probably correct. I don't think enough of these things. Yeah, but coming back to the whole general problem of the changing moral status of actions. Yeah, so and sometimes very often actions that if you are utilitarian, actions may become right or wrong through no fault of your own, right? For example, maybe I do something today that benefits a whole bunch of people, but then maybe 10 years down the road, the world has changed, and whatever I do today maybe ends up. You see this. I think you see this in politics or in the in law a lot, right? I come out with a policy today that benefits a lot of people, but then 10 years down the road, maybe the world has changed, lots of things have changed, and that same policy ends up harming a bunch of people. So then if it ends up harming more people than the people I originally benefited, then now the policy or the action is wrong. Yeah, it seems weird. It seems weird that that actions should be so can become right or wrong depending on what changes happen in the world. Interesting.
Could actions also then become right or wrong based upon perspective or like the person that we're talking to?
Possible.
So to determine something as like right or wrong, I like to say that does that mean we have to have like innate knowledge of everything to determine something right or wrong? For example, like that means like we would have to have like a perfect life to determine like what is right or wrong, right?
Perfect life. Okay.
But
innate
even
knowledge,
underneath the assumptions that our justice, what is right or wrong, would have to be better than someone else's.
when you say innate knowledge, do you just mean having perfect information, or do you mean something different?
Innate knowledge, I mean like you know everything and perfect information.
Okay. Because when you say innate knowledge, so you see, let's not talk about utilitarianism for a moment. Let's talk about virtue theory. So when people like Plato and Aristotle and all that, when they were talking about the importance of the virtues, or the Stoics doing the same thing, they never really talk about innate knowledge. But what they are talking about is that they believe that so long as you are human who has to live among other humans, there will always be certain unchanging virtues that you should cultivate in order to live well among human beings and live a good life. So the virtues, they are kind of innate knowledge in the sense that it's almost like virtues is a kind of like common currency a common current moral currency that you can kind of carry around. So if you have the virtues, right, no matter where you live in the world, no matter what group of people you end up with, you'll always live well with those people and be a flourishing, happy person. So virtue is like a common moral currency. So
So underneath the virtue theories, let's just say that you add self-evidence underneath it. So anything that's self-evidence means non-degrading humanity or like human perspective. Would that mean morality justified underneath that?
underneath that,
Underneath self-evidence.
okay.
For example, let's say that we step back to the Nazi theory that we were talking about. Let's just say all of those people did not want to be killed. Okay, like of course in human nature, nobody would in the right mind, like I say right mind as in like they have the proper choice, like proper mental stability to make decisions. They have the right mind to say like they don't want to be killed. So what does that mean? Like it would have been wrong back then underneath self-evidence.
I think about the Nazis got around this problem by saying, by basically saying that Jewish people are not people; they're not really humans. So it's right. So and then you know what I mean. I'm sure you know how this goes. If somebody is not human, then it's okay to to do all kinds of horrible things to them.
Like to dehumanize people is to say like they're not human, so therefore I don't have to treat them like human.
Yeah. So the funny, okay, it's not funny, but the disturbing. Okay, I know it's almost time. The disturbing thing is that you can believe in all this innate knowledge, right? And still do some really horrible things, because you might say, look, I agree that if you are human, you should cultivate all these virtues, and one of these virtues would be to treat other humans with a certain amount of compassion and all that. But Jews are not humans, so therefore you don't have to treat them nicely.
So does that mean like going underneath loopholes to justify like try to justify something? For example, like as soon as you say something's not human, like you dehumanize it, then pretty much you don't have to have self-evidence underneath it. For
Something like
example,
that.
they did that in slavery as well.
Something
all
like
the
that.
slaves were not human, so therefore they could be anything to them.
Yeah, another way of saying the same thing, I think, is that, when we're talking about moral theories, right? Moral theories only apply to moral creatures. And if you can only be a moral creature, if you are a being that understands morality. So you don't have to be moral to chickens. You can eat chickens because chickens are not moral creatures. There are some people who disagree with this, but let's not worry about that. So chickens are not moral creatures, therefore it's okay to eat them. Jews are not humans. This is supposed to be recorded on YouTube. This is horrible. I can't believe I'm saying this. Okay, if I'm a Nazi, I would say that Jews are not humans, and therefore they are not moral creatures, and therefore it's okay to eat them. No, it's okay to do horrible things to them. Okay. Yes. We didn't quite get through. I guess we got through this objection, and maybe this objection. This one not so much. Okay, I'll say a bit about this on Thursday, and then we'll go on to chapter 3. Okay. Cool. Thank you very much. And so please, do they still have the wipes here? Yeah, please take a moment to wipe down your desktop before you head out.